Well, good evening, folks, and welcome to Burlington and Beyond. I'm Larry Way. To my right is John Glenn and Adam Sinesi. And our special guest this evening is Tom Sheff. He's running for Governor's Council. He lives in Newton. He's an independent. There is no Republican on the ballot in this Governor Council district. There is a Democrat. So, Tom, what if we begin by you telling us what is the Governor's Council and why do you want to run for it?
The Governor's Council is a group of elected people. The state is split up into 8 districts, and there's one councilor per district, and they give advice and consent to the governor regarding his or her nominee for judgeships, clerkships, and parole board. They do other things, but those are 3 big things that they do.
Judgeships, clerkships, and
parole board.
boards.
So they meet once a week on Wednesdays. And that's it. It's a part-time position nobody knows about. So,
Well, we appreciate you educating us. What are those other functions? Just to be clear about the total functionality of the governor's council, board of
they do
governors.
notaries, pardons and commutations, and they also approve the budget from the previous year. I mean, that's just a everybody votes in favor of the budget. Okay. So the previous week's budget.
So it sounds like you need to have a good lawyer background or legal background in order to serve on such a council.
You think? Yes.
Well, you tell us.
Well, I'll just go into my background. I was born and raised in Newton. I hope that you guys don't hold that against me or anything.
No, of course not.
But I was born and raised in Newton, and I went to Clark University in Worcester and went to law school out in Michigan. Then I worked for the family. I managed the family law office for about 5 years. And right now I'm co-founder of a nonprofit called Second Life Computers. The biggest difference, you're right, one of the prerequisites of this job should be you have to have some form of legal education, because the biggest part of the job is evaluating attorneys to be judges. And quite frankly, I have my doubts about the incumbent being able to do that. But anyway, that's one of the biggest differences between me and her, is the fact that I have the legal education and legal background that she doesn't have.
How many people on the Governor's Council currently have legal backgrounds?
Well, I know there's at least 3 lawyers.
Okay.
And I'm not sure about, I don't know I know that the person I'm running against, and I'm not afraid to say her name because I want people to Google her, is Marilyn Petito Devaney. And she's been a politician pretty much her whole life. So,
Okay, and why is it that you feel she needs to be replaced?
why do I feel?
Yes.
Because I don't think she feels that way. She has made some very sketchy decisions in the past. And one of the things happened back in November. It actually it compelled me to run, which is a situation that happened in February where a nominee, his name was Joe Berman, and he graduated Dartmouth College. He went to law school at Michigan. He had 20 years of experience. And she voted against him because he was an officer of the New England Anti-Defamation League. Now, her reasoning for that was that she's from Watertown, and in Watertown there's a small population of Armenian people, and the Anti-Defamation League refuses to call the Armenian-Turkish War a genocide. While Mr. Attorney Berman agreed that it was a genocide, he was an officer of an organization that refused to accept that it was a genocide. He got them to call the genocide. He got the national ADL to come out and say that it was tantamount to a genocide. And they still weren't happy with that. So, which I can't blame them. But there's a time and a place for that type of, that wasn't the right place to have that conversation, to determine whether a person would make a good judge or not based upon a civic organization they belong to, in my opinion. I hope 51% of the people out there's opinion too, but.
And otherwise, Tom, you felt this candidate was very qualified to to be a judge?
Well, whether I would have voted for or against that person, I don't know because I don't have the resume. I only know what was made public. So I understand that there were some sketchy donations going on, or I don't know. And I wasn't at other meetings. But I can tell you that using the ADL as a reason not to vote for someone is, in my eyes, is ludicrous. It's crazy.
Where do they report news on something? I mean, you seem very knowledgeable on this, and you've obviously followed the inside baseball leading up to your own race here. But where do you find out? Where do you go for the news to learn about this?
Once in a while, when something crazy like this happens, the State House News will pick it up, then the Globe will pick it up, and the Herald will pick it up. It's one of the few things that the Globe and the Herald will agree on, is that how crazy the Governor's Council can be, how dysfunctional this group of people. And anytime they write a letter like that, an article like that, it always is, the subject of that is always my opponent. And if we take her out of the equation, I think people will see the functionality, how terrific the Governor's Council could be. You know, they'll understand the checks and balances that this group can actually, you know, its intent was checks and balances on the governor. And if we take her out of she's full of drama. And I don't want this to be a show bashing her, but she's full of drama, and we take her out of the picture, it'll be a lot better place. You know, it'll be a lot better.
Because when you're evaluating judges, my assumption is that you look at their written work, you know, the cases that they've presided over, and get a sense of, you know, their bipartisanship and fairness in the role, which is their responsibility. And I would assume that should have been or would have been the basis of what.
That's my point.
What determines whether he's, you know, competent to, you know, to move forward or not. I mean,
that's my point. I got nothing. You know, you said it better than me.
Yeah, there are always going to be social groups that you're aligned with
Exactly.
that some people are not going to agree with.
Right.
So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and it seemed like he had the qualifications. Again, I don't know how I would have voted. You know, I don't have the resume in front of me, or the background in front of me. But what I heard, I don't agree with. But let me go a little bit further back, because I started paying attention to the Governor's Council back in 2010 when this is Burlington, so you're right next to Woburn, right?
Yeah.
Next to
Right.
the over.
Yep.
So there was a situation that the parole board back in 2009, 2010 let go a guy by the name of Dominic Sinelli. Do you remember this story at all?
I don't.
Do you remember?
No,
this?
I do not.
Okay, Dominic Sinelli was a hardened criminal. He had been arrested 5 times, armed robbery, and he was obviously going to do it again. So the parole board, for some reason, let him go. And after, you'll remember this once I tell you this, what happened.
I think I know where you're going with it.
6 months after he was free,
Yep.
he, on Christmas Eve,
I know where you're going with it.
he robbed the Coles on Woburn.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And there was a shootout.
Yeah.
And a Woburn police officer
Was killed.
in my opinion, was unnecessarily killed because of the incompetence of this particular parole board.
Sergeant Jack Mullen, was that his name? if I remember?
McGuire, I think.
McGuire.
If my memory serves, his last
I
name was
believe you're
McGuire.
correct.
And I would love to meet the family if they ever get the show. But anyway, so eventually Governor Patrick forced all the people to resign. But that's not me going. It's like how they get put in place to begin with, and that's how I got to the Governor's Council. That's how I started paying attention. And then, of course, Berman put me over the top.
Two things that caught my eye is you felt the top qualities are transparency and common sense. I always like when I see common sense.
Common sense is big.
Common
And
sense ain't so common anymore.
No, it should be uncommon sense. But transparency. That's one of the reasons why I feel very strongly that when I approach people, 95% of the people I approach don't know what the Governor's Council is, what they do. They never heard of it. So it's not their fault that they haven't heard of it. It's the
They haven't heard of it until tonight.
right. It's the governor's council themselves' fault for not teaching people what it is, what the governor's council does. And so it's not their fault, but once they hear what they do, and once they learn a little bit about it, they get curious, and they start looking into it themselves. And it's actually fun to watch them, watch people, they say, oh, I didn't know anything about this before, but now I'm really excited to learn about it. Because I make phone calls. We connected because I've been calling people for the last 2 months, personally calling people instead of a robocall or a volunteer, to reach out to people to talk to them on the phone, tell them what the governor's council was, my background and things. And I've contacted about 7,500 people. I haven't talked to 7,500 people, but I either left a message or and my goal is 15,000 people. Now, 15,000 people isn't much in our district, because our district is 500,000 voters, and it's 800,000 people. So it's not, but I'm hoping that the word of mouth, I'm hoping that if people like what they read on my website and they like what they see on the show, I hope that there'll be a word of mouth, a little buzz going.
Now, getting back to the governor's council, I hope that's true too. How are the candidates presented to the governor's council? Do you do any search in regards to who comes in front of you, or is that handled by?
This is a good question. It's a really good question, because there's a process for judges. Well, there's a process for that. The most important, we're going to zero in on judges because it's the most important thing.
Right.
So let's say a judgeship opens up. There's 413 judgeships. A lot of these judgeships, not all of them, but a lot of them are lifetime positions. Okay, that means you can only make one mistake. That guy from the ADL, you can only make one, he'll be able to reapply somewhere down the line, but you're only allowed to make one mistake. Otherwise, because then he's in for life, no matter what. There's a mandatory retirement at 70, but they're in for life. So what the process is, when there's an opening, applications come in and resumes come in from attorneys and from non-attorneys, some non-attorneys able to be judges. And they go to a group of people called the Judicial Nominating Committee. The Judicial Nominating Committee is comprised of 21 attorneys that were all appointed by the governor. The 21 attorneys, the JNC, interview and question all 100, let's call it 100 applications that come in, and they narrow it down to 3, and they hand that to the governor. The governor is not allowed to know about the other 97 people that were rejected, just the 3 that's in front of him or her. He or she then takes the 3 and then submits one of those 3 to the governor's council, and if they accept it, that person's a judge. If they reject it, the governor must go back to one of the other 2 that he didn't take the first time around. He does not have veto power over rejections.
Now, let me ask a
Interesting.
question.
Okay, can I just add
please,
one?
please.
I'm sorry.
No,
Can you just
please.
remind me? When there's a 4-4 tie, as in the situation with Joe Perlman, it was a 4-4 tie. Normally what happens is the lieutenant governor casts the deciding vote. But since, as of right now, Massachusetts doesn't have a lieutenant governor, he lost 4-4. So I just wanted to put that in there. He lost because he didn't win. He didn't get that 5th vote.
Right. Now, my question is, the governor, is he allowed to, for example, go on to OCPF, see who's donated to the Democrat Party? In the case of Deval Patrick, I mean, can he just see where the political donations of this judge have gone and promote the person based on that alone? Well, not alone,
No,
but
that's the checks and balances part.
Okay.
He can't do that because there's a process. They got to go through the JNC. He can't take anyone in the population. He can't say, "Oh, you raised $110,000 for me. You can be a judge now." He can't do that.
Okay.
The nominees have to come through the JNC.
Okay.
And if they don't go through, if he doesn't get past that stage, he can't pull that person up.
How does a JNC get created?
Appointed by the governor.
So he has a fair amount of influence in
Yeah,
terms of the
yes.
people that he's got in that
Yes, yeah.
in
I
that
mean,
role. So
there's-
he's got his share of
There's
influence.
gaps, yeah, there's gaps in the process,
Right.
and a lot of people are calling for the end of the process, but I don't see a better process. A lot of people want to do away with the governor's council. About 15% of people want to do away with it, and in my opinion, they want that because they don't like the current governor's council. So, if you don't like the current governor's council, you want to get rid of them. So,
Make sure that you vote.
I'm sorry.
Make sure that you vote.
Make sure that they vote. Yeah.
Or you could be like down south and have the judgeships all elected positions, and then really have the legal system be political in the extreme.
One of the things that I'm working on, not related to the governor's council, one of the things I'm working on with my state rep is to have some sort of review process. Once they're in, a lot of these people are in for life. So that could be 20, 25 years, and there's no real review. There's no real review. The training's getting better, but there's really no real review. And what I want to do is to create some sort of review process where like every 5 or 10 years, 5 years, they get reviewed by citizens and a committee of citizens and lawyers. And
We're talking about the judges
judges,
now.
once they're in office, yeah. Because let's face it, I don't know about you guys, okay? I can't comment, I just met you guys, but I'm not as sharp as I was when I was 20 years old. These guys, in all probability, aren't going to be as sharp as when they're 55 as when they're 50, or when they're 60 as opposed to 55. So this is just to keep them on their toes. And if they don't make it, we're in the very early stages of forming the bill, but so we really haven't decided what happens if they don't pass. But you can't take away the job from them. What you might be able to do is retrain them. But they still have the lifetime. You can't take away a lifetime appointment.
It sounds like you have some reservations about the lifetime appointment, to where you wish we could put in something else to make sure they're competent after 10 years, 20 years. And
That
it
would be
sounds
great,
like-
but that's a constitutional thing, and I don't want to get into changing the state
So you
constitution.
pretty much want to keep it as is, but you'd like there be some sort of
Review,
retraining,
yeah.
re-education.
Well, what's the average age of the Supreme Court?
You got me there.
I don't really see how you retrain a judge either. I
I
don't
would
really
think they would
get that.
I would think they'd become more competent with age, just because they've seen so much pass.
Well, maybe training is not the right word, but
But an evaluation of the decisions
Yeah, yeah.
that they make, and whether there's logic associated with it. And in a lot of cases, there's
because let's face it,
that may disappear, but that may not
my
necessarily.
father passed away of Alzheimer's. Looking back, I could have seen, and he was a lawyer, and I could have seen when he was in his 50s and 60s little instances where he was starting to slip. And I don't want that type of, if someone's starting to slip, let's catch that early when they're
that part's
determining,
true, yeah.
they're determining, they could put a bad judge or an inefficient judge could put guilty people on the street. They can have big polluters keep polluting the environment. They can make bad decisions in family court. So let's nip it in the bud. Let's get them regrouped or whatever we have to do, and let's go forward from there. Can't
So-
take the job away, but
So the idea would be you'd be a judges panel. Would it be a group of judges doing a peer review of all the judges in the state?
no, it'd be
that
lawyers. It
concept?
would probably be lawyers, because I think judges would kind of wouldn't want to
Just like
evaluate
doctors,
each
just
other.
like doctors doing peer reviews of themselves in the medical industry. Why is there any difference? That's
Because
pretty
I-
much how they, evaluate each other.
Well, I mean, that's all up in the air.
Sure.
I don't, it's all in the work, I'll just leave it at that. It could be, it's a possibility.
So
Just
for
curious.
right now you're uncomfortable with them getting the lifetime appointment as a judge. You're looking for something to do, not as far as a recall, but as far as
Right.
checking out to make sure they're up to snuff.
Just want to have little checks and balances in place just in case something, God forbid, happens with their memory or with their personality, where they no longer become that good judge that they once were.
Is there any way to remove them from office if they need to be?
You can impeach them, I assume, and that's
Yeah,
probably about
there
it.
is a way,
Is that
but
it?
that's a huge process.
That's-
And,
That's pretty complicated.
yeah.
Now, the other two areas you were involved with, I was unaware of this. I thought the entire responsibility of the Governor's Council was for judgeships, but so you're involved in the parole board? All the different parole boards around the state? I'm not even aware of how many there are.
I think you're thinking probation. Parole board, I think there's only Boston, and they go travel to all the different, I think there's 8 people, and 7 or 8 people, and they all make like 6 digits. And it's a full-time job. And they go out to the different prisons.
Was
they
that how?
interview.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my understanding. Pretty sure that's true. That there's just one. I'm sure we'll get a call one day saying, "Oh no, that's not true." But
Yeah, I have no idea how that whole
my
scenario
understanding is that
works.
there's one parole board. And
Oh, okay.
And you oversee their decisions?
No.
Or you review their
Once
decisions?
they're in, they're in.
No, just
Once they're in, they're in. Just like you don't review
It's the same
judge.
process
It's the
as the
same
judges.
process.
Yeah.
Once they get appointed, they review
They're on
that.
their own.
and
They
then
get trained and.
They're in for life too, I assume.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
How many approvals?
No, there's a
Age,
Yeah.
probably you got to retire, but
So you meet once a week. How many
For Governor's
approvals
Council.
do you typically go through per session? I mean, how many per year? How much turnover is there?
well, there's 413 statewide judges.
Okay.
So you're looking at, as far as judges go, you're looking at maybe 10 to 15, because of the because now also a
Per
factor.
week or per
no,
year?
per year.
Okay.
per year.
Okay, because there's only 400 of them. So you have mandatory, most of them term out, it's, when they're 70, work till they're 70. But there's other, obviously there's other. Like tomorrow there's a meeting which I'm going to, which is, now DeVal Patrick's, one of DeVal Patrick's first supporters is trying to get a judgeship. His name is Joshua Wall, I think his name is Josh Wall. And
Was it Ben Laguerre?
I'm sorry?
I'm just bad joke.
Well, Josh Wall, and that's going to be it's going to be a lot of people opposing his nomination. His wife got a appointed job too from Patrick, so it's going to be an interesting day.
So
Yeah.
this one's just purely a political appointee, and I managed
Well, I
to get through the
think
JNC, kind of vetted this through with a little
I
influence from
think
the
he's got
governor.
the qualifications. I think he's got the experience to be a judge, and I think he's got the background. But the fact that they ask him about political donations, and they go 3 years back to the governor, donations to the governor. Well, he stopped donating. I mean, they had this planned out. He stopped donating 3.5 years ago. They had it planned out. So they can go back 3 years, and he can honestly say, no, I haven't donated three in the last 3 years. But if you go back another 6 months, he donated the maximum. So,
Pretty cute.
yeah.
No,
They had that planned out.
Know the system.
They had
No,
that
not
planned.
a surprise.
They had that planned
Sure.
out.
So what are the qualities of a judge that you'd be looking for?
Good question. What I'm looking for is someone who can take a set of facts and apply the current law to the set of facts. One of the things I don't want to see is judges that want to create law. Okay, if they want to create law, let them run for a legislative job. That's not their responsibility as a judge. As far as personality goes, someone they call it a judicial temperament, where someone who is patient and is willing to talk to you instead of talking at you, and someone who's patient with you, and someone who can admit to himself that he's not always the smartest person in the room. I think that's a big feature that I'd like to see in people. Along with experience in law, the love of law, stuff like that. But those are the characteristics I'd be looking for.
Are there any positions that they would have that you'd look at and either make sure you agree with or make sure that they're on the right side of various issues or certain issues?
The only thing
Would you look at issues at all?
The only thing that I would care about is if someone was a member of an organization. Let's take the ADL, since we were talking about the ADL. someone who is a member of a group like the ADL, who would be able to objectively rule in favor or against that organization if there was a time where that organization came in front of them on a lawsuit.
Well,
That's
correct me, though.
objective.
If that happens, they should really recuse themselves.
Yeah, but you don't have to. But that, yeah,
But you should.
that's another. Yeah, if they want to recuse themselves, I'd be fine with that too.
Okay.
If they came and said, if during the open hearing they came and said, well, I don't think I could be impartial, but I'd recuse myself if I felt I couldn't be impartial, I'd be fine with that answer.
Okay. So legal background and able to know when you shouldn't be part of that ruling
Yeah.
are
yeah.
good qualities.
Yeah, in
Transparency?
my opinion. Transparency, again, the thing that I think that this governor's council is lacking is transparency. And what I want to do is bring video. I belong to the local cable station in Newton, and I have access to video equipment there. What I would do is bring a video camera, a tripod, place it right in the open hearing so that I can open up so everybody's in the picture, and I would videotape that open hearing and edit it down to, let's say, an hour and a half, and send that to all the different cities and towns in the district. There's 32 of them, and if anyone outside the district is free to have it too. And people can actually watch and eventually, if this goes through, if I get elected and I'm able to do this, people will be able to see what's going on at these meetings from their own living room. And they won't have to come in town. Nobody wants to schlep in town. The traffic's terrible. So
If they disagree, they could call in, right?
if they disagree, they have my number and my website, and I'll be glad to talk. I'll be glad to talk them down.
Well, that's very nice.
Well, I'd be surprised if a lot of people actually, unless they're directly involved for some reason, actually make it to a governor's council meeting.
Well, yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think probably 90% of the population doesn't even know what the governance council is, what it's all about,
But
and
once
what
they-
they're voting for.
Once they find out that a governor's council exists, see, the natural inclination is to think the governor just appoints the judges, and he's allowed to appoint them from the population. That's what, right? That's what you thought?
Yeah.
Is that what you thought?
No, I'm familiar with the governance council.
Okay. So, Larry, did you know that?
I'm learning quite a bit tonight, so I
Okay, so
appreciate
the most people think that the governor just appoints it, and there's a process, there's a checks and balances in place, and but once they start understanding the process, they really get into it. They really want to know more, and I'm hoping to flip that 90% of the people don't know to 90% of people know, which is a huge undertaking. I know that's not going to happen, but hell, I'll take 75%.
You'd still be way ahead of the curve.
I'll take 75%.
Okay, is there anything that you want to speak directly to our audience on, or
Okay, hello.
about why we should elect Tom Sheff for Governor's Council?
Okay.
And of course, the ballot just says counselor, right?
Yes, thank you. The ballot only says counselor, and I just feel that if you feel, we've got a governor's council that the Globe, the Herald, the State House News all makes fun of. They think it's dysfunctional. They've called it a circus, and it's the people that are in the council that are really what makes the governor's council. So logically speaking, if you want to turn the council around, you vote out the people that are in there right now. The problem with that is that, again, 90% of the people don't know what they just vote because there's a D next to. I'm running as an independent. She's a Democrat. They vote for her because people vote for her because she's a Democrat. Some people gender vote. Some people, there's all kinds of reasons that she would get the vote, an uneducated vote. I would love to educate you. I would love to have your support. Again, the biggest difference between me and her is my legal education and background, and I don't know. They don't take regular citizens and have them evaluate surgeons. Why take regular citizens and evaluate attorneys? So the logic befuddles me, but that's the way it is. So I'll just say my website is www.votetomsheff.com. That's SHEFF. I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions. My contact information's on there. I would love to answer any questions you might have pertaining to the race.
Did you want to give out your phone number too?
617
Okay.
795-7076. And may as well go email it, even though it's all on there. It's ahhinc@hotmail.com.
Sounds like we have an honest politician here.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for educating us. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. This is really fun. I
Tom, thanks for
appreciate it.
coming.
All right, Tom,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much for coming in.
Thank you.
And then now we wanted to take a look at some of the races that have wound up on the ballot, November's ballot. And Adam, did you have any feelings about the race for governor?
Yeah, well,
How that
obviously, now things have fallen into place. In lieu of last week's primary, we've figured out that Martha Coakley will be the Democrat nominee for governor, and Charlie Baker has solidified his position as the Republican nominee. Should be an interesting race. I understand. I mean, a lot of the prognosticators and so they thought Martha Coakley was going to walk away with in a landslide with the nomination, but it was a lot closer than had been anticipated. Martha Coakley only beat Steve Grossman by about 5 points, so I think that was one of the big surprises to come out of the evening. I do want to rewind a little bit. I think the biggest surprise to come out of the evening was that John Tierney no longer our congressional rep here in
That's
Burlington.
true.
right.
That was the news.
That was definitely the biggest story to come out of the evening. I mean, it's rare that you see an incumbent get knocked off, never mind knocked off in a primary. But if there was anyone more deserving of getting flushed, I would agree that John Tierney is the guy. I know Richard Tassay is a friend of this program and a friend of ours, and I think his race just got a little bit harder. But
It did.
it got a lot harder. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. If you think about it, I mean, this race is really somewhat ironic. I mean, you have as the Democrat candidate an Iraq war veteran, and as the Republican candidate, a gay man. So, I mean, that's sort of an anomaly from what you usually see in national politics, and it runs against the typecast of either party in certain instances. So I think we have a really interesting race on our hands. What do you guys think?
Have we seen any numbers on that yet? Any
Polling numbers?
polling
No, it'll
numbers,
take
yeah.
a couple of
It's
weeks.
a little
But
too early.
Richard's got a good background in the state Senate. He ran for lieutenant governor with Charlie 4 years ago, so I think he's got fairly good exposure. He ran a good race against Tierney last time around and just missed by a couple thousand votes, if memory serves correctly. I think he's done a good job politicking in the district, and he's a quality guy. So I think he's going to bring a more fiscally conservative perception of how Washington needs to work, and I think that that's something that that sentiment certainly is being strongly aired around the country. So I think he's still got a good platform on which to operate from. I'm not really familiar with what his opposition is really talking about. If memory serves correctly, I think he said his views weren't a whole lot different than Tierney's.
I'm having a tough time reconciling that because I did read Seth Moulton is now the Democrat nominee for the
Right.
state the congressional rep position, and I read some of what he stands for as far as the economics, and there were places in his platform where he sounded very conservative, talking about small business tax cuts and things that would, as a conservative, resonate with me. But I don't understand how that would reconcile with his line that I would vote the same way as Tierney. That just
Which is what he said.
That's what he said.
He said, it's just that I would be a better candidate to run in this election because of John's baggage, obviously. But
That was
he
his
said-
pitch.
Yeah, but he said our differences were minimal. So on one hand, you've got him throwing some of that, conservative talk speech out there, but in reality, how true is that? And one of the problems you really see in Washington is, how much people just vote on party lines. The whip gets them into whatever position that they want them to, and say, if you want to get a higher position in the House and get some of these committees, then you're going to vote the way we tell you to vote.
Right.
And the only time I've seen that really change is the rebellion that the Republicans have had to deal with, because those guys got elected with a much more conservative platform, and they've held their ground on quite a few things. And so it's been a more independent, I think, Congress in the House side anyways, than we've seen in a long time, which I think is what a lot of people want to see. Open dialogue, a disagreement with what the leadership in the chamber dictates, and they say, no, we're not going to vote that way, and have rebelled on a couple of occasions. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that in the Senate, which is a little bit of a different body and harder to do. But I think that's a positive sign that they're starting to listen to their constituents and maybe not willing to go along to get along, which seems to be the staple of Washington for so long. And I know the general population is extraordinarily unhappy right now. Even my friends in California, who are very liberal, are just really disgusted with what they're seeing coming out of Washington. And I think that's really starting to sweep across the country. They want to see change. They want to see government get its a handle around the financial aspects of running the country. They want to see job creation. I mean, this has been a no-job economy for the last 6 years, and you can blame Bush forever, but the reality is you've been in power for 6 or 7 years and you haven't done anything to move that forward. The one plan they had was that $1 trillion handout, which to me was just an embarrassment, and there's really been nothing but talk and no action out of Washington, no understanding of how regulations are hurting the country, how it's pushing jobs overseas. It's just a lot that Washington could do that would really improve the work environment for a lot of people in this country. So, and I think that's coming from both sides, whether it be Democrat or Republican. So it'll be a very curious election this time around to see what shakes out. But I still think that if they really were focused on what it means to win, job creation more than anything else, I think is what's going to matter. The message in the East is, it gets a lot of press, but I'm not sure there's anything we can do to resolve a lot of those issues. But anyways, your own perspective, Larry.
Well, I think it's a good time to be a Republican as far as this election goes. And I think as far as our representative in Congress goes, I think Richard Say has the better name recognition at this point. So I think that would favor him in November election. I think it's going to be a tough race at top, and I think the other race that I think would be very interested in is Attorney General. And I think that would also be it's going to be a very interesting race, where we have a very good chance of picking up the Attorney General.
I agree. One of the takeaways from last primary night was what a bunch of nobodies the Democrats have as their nominees. And you know what? The Republicans got a bunch of nobodies too, for the most part. But I think it's a fair fight. A lot of these people, Deb Goldberg for treasurer. Who is Deb Goldberg again? I mean, I know nothing about her. I saw her ads. One of her ads as treasurer was that, as treasurer and overseeing the pension fund, she won't allow any companies, she won't buy stock in any companies that, for example, this is one of our commercials, by the way, that deny access to contraception via the healthcare plan. What does that have to do with being treasurer? I understand that they oversee and manage the pension fund, but really, what does that have to do with the job at hand that she's tasked with doing?
Well, it's
overseeing the pension fund. I get it.
Well, that part of it, but it's the age-old adage of women's issues have always been strong issues for the Democrats. So any way that they can hook an angle into it, they will.
I understand. It's pandering at its finest.
Yeah. So,
but
and it'll resonate.
I agree, but I think that
But it really has nothing to do with the position.
It has nothing to do with the position. I don't think that they're Democrats in Massachusetts. Yes, this is a home game for them. But if you look, let's rewind. Let's go back just a couple of years in time. You've got Deval Patrick, who, forget about what we think of him on this show. Nationally, he's a star for the Democrats. You had Ted Kennedy and John Kerry in office, who again were big establishment names. Now you got Markey, who's a lightweight, as our senator. The Democrats for their nominee have Martha Coakley, who still has the stench of 2010 and losing to Scott Brown.
Well, Elizabeth Warren's is making headlines.
Elizabeth Warren is a star, but I think there's a lot of people, even on the Democrat side, that kind of look at her and say, we're more Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton Democrats than we are Elizabeth Warren Democrats. I mean, she's out there on the fringe. She is the Mrs. Occupy Wall Street. She is the senator of Occupy Wall Street in that whole crowd. And that's far left. That's out of the mainstream of where this state is. To get back to the race for Congress, I think someone like Richard Desai, who is a very centrist and moderate record, regardless of his party affiliation, his he is a little bit of a maverick. He tends to be a little bit more liberal on the social issues, conservative on the economic issues. I think someone like him, contrary to his party affiliation, is far more in step with the general electorate here in Massachusetts than a lot of these candidates on the Democrat side.
Oh, quite true. That's very true.
He's got to take that. He's got to take his story to the people, one person at a time, and he's got to. He's been working this district. Like we said before, he was on the show. He's been to Burlington several times.
I was at the Celebrate Burlington.
He was at Celebrate Burlington, shaking
August.
hands,
Yep.
and he's just got to pound the pavement and make people aware of his record and that he has a record. And right now, he's up against a candidate who's really just a blank slate. And for all intents and purposes, his opponent, Seth Moulton, seems like a nice guy. He's an Iraq War veteran. Sure. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything ethical in his past. He is a breath of fresh air after dealing with tyranny. And regardless of how things end up on November 4th, we're walking away with someone better in that office than the guy we just flushed.
That's true, and I think, again, on Desai's behalf, he does have the better name recognition, and he's been working very hard.
He has been working very hard, but I think if there is one candidate to come out of last Tuesday night on the Democrat side that generates some excitement, Martha Coakley does not generate excitement from within her own side. She was supposed to win that race by 30 points. She won it by 5 points. The big losers of the evening were the candidates of organized labor. Steve Grossman, backed heavily by organized labor, as well as Warren Tolman, who ran for Attorney General. Both of those candidates.
And Tolman had good name recognition. He got blown out of the water.
Tolman had strong name recognition.
That really surprised me.
Either a sizable chunk of that coalition, the union stalwarts, either they stayed home or they were just overwhelmed by the far left of their party. I'll tell you, the organized labor aspect of the Democrat Party, at least organized labor, at least they work. At least they get up in the morning and go to jobs. The rest of them, the whole, Deb Goldberg and her free contraception. There are programs, there are government-run programs that allow you to go to Target and get contraception for a subsidized rate. But, the Democrats, the far left, they need to hit you over the head and demand that it's an absolute right to get it for free.
Yeah, that Supreme Court decision was really a red herring when they kind of focused in on, if you really listen to the decision, it's not like you cannot get it.
Right.
There are so many programs out there that provide that already that it just basically said that employers were not dictated to have to provide that if it went against their religious beliefs. So you're dealing with a couple of segments of the Constitution. What's first? So you're talking about personal privacy rights versus religious rights, and the court kind of sniggled something in, if you will,
right
down the middle. But that certainly was not a decision that was going to prevent women to be able to go out and get contraception at for no cost, because there are so many programs that will support that out there anyway. So in that regard, it really is. It's not that big an issue, and I think a lot of people in the state believe that women have the right to choose in that regard. So
I believe them. I think in this state, there's probably a majority that believe that are pro-choice. However, at the same time, the way that the far left demonizes any position that someone to the right of them, or as the Supreme Court had ruled, they want to demonize that like it's an inch away from overturning Roe versus Wade, which is just
No, it was a very narrow decision, very narrow.
right. But they want to overplay the hand every time and make it into something that it just isn't.
Well, it's because it resonates. It just resonates.
No, I get
with
that.
a
I get
part of the
that.
population.
It's smart politics. I just
Yeah.
don't think it's a very kind of a dirty way to win an election, though, in my opinion. But
Certainly not the best. Certainly, we really want to see candidates who are pro-growth,
well, that's what it all comes down to. Without the economy.
pro-employment.
Without the economy, like one of you two had said before, really the economics is what it all comes down to. And once we lose our economic freedoms, and once our economy, when you're watching, I think in many instances we've watched employers take advantage of their employees the last couple of years, and as wages have stagnated, people have been stuck in jobs that they don't necessarily want but are afraid to leave because they don't really know what their prospects are if they were to leave their company or their job or whatever.
Oh yeah, look at the unemployment from last month, 142,000. That was horrible. I mean, the country needs to generate close to 300,000 new jobs to fuel the kids coming out of school as well as people shifting positions. I mean, the job growth in this country over the last 6 years has been abysmal.
Right.
So nobody wants to leave. A lot of people want to leave, but they're not going to because there's too much fear out there.
So, I mean, what's going to make you happier? A vibrant economy that you're confident that you're going to be able to provide for yourself and your family for the foreseeable future, or an economy where you're looking over your shoulder for the human resource person to come with the pink slip, but oh wait, the contraception that you could buy for $10 at Target is free. I mean,
Yeah.
The Democrats have no economic message. Steve Grossman himself, the Democrat challenger, called Martha Coakley's economic plan a fake plan. She doesn't have a plan. She's been a lifetime politician who's been a prosecutor. What does she know about managing an economy?
Yeah, and look at Charlie Baker's comment about job creation in Massachusetts over the last 8 years with Duvall in office. There's been no job growth here. There's been no influx of people into Massachusetts looking for positions. It's gone the other way. People are leaving the state for jobs, whether it's down south or out west, where there is some activity. But here it's just been, flat forever, really, for a long time.
So I think that's going to resonate more with voters than certainly these other side issues which have been pushed into center stage. I just don't think that's going to take this time around. I think the economy is much too important.
I agree. And as we as we had segued into this tangent, I mean, there are a lot of candidates like John Miller, like Mike Heffernan, that have good messages to tell, and it's not. I look at the governor's office as an office that is a steward of the economy in many ways, whereas the attorney general's office, it's a he is the lawyer for Massachusetts. I mean, he's looking to call balls and strikes fairly. That's really the position that he's been selling to the electorate, that he's not a he claims to not be an ideologue, and he's gonna take each case as it comes his way, and he's going to conduct himself as a professional more than a political player or a political pawn, or he's not looking to politicize his office. In fact, he's come out and said that this is not a political office. This is a professional office.
Yeah, this is not a stepping stone for me. This is it. He was just going to be running for this.
Yeah, and in Mike Heffernan, the candidate for treasurer, I mean, Charlie Baker's got a fantastic resume. Mike Heffernan's resume might even be better and more. I mean, his background in business and
it's impressive.
Starting companies, and I mean, and Deb Goldberg. I mean, I don't know much about her background outside of the fact that she's an heiress to the Stop and Shop fortune. So we've got some trustafarian versus a guy that's gone out and created jobs, and understands how the economy works, understands about managing a budget.
So how about at the state level? How about for state rep?
State rep.
How's that race looking?
Well, we've got a candidate who's a friend of ours, Paul Girard, who I know is out working really hard to get his name recognition out there.
That's been very impressive also.
Yep.
He's
Yeah.
worked many days and many hours during those days. At this.
I don't know how he does it, to tell you the truth, because I know he's been working very hard. And to be fair, you know what? I see Ken Gordon out there also working hard. The difference is people got to listen, and people got to understand what the issues are. You know, in Ken Gordon, we've got a candidate who voted to raise the gas tax. We had a candidate who voted to raise the technology tax before he voted against it. And when I say that, keep in mind that businesses, and you would know better than I would as a town meeting member, both of you gentlemen would, what proportion of our tax base do businesses make up here in Burlington?
I like to make it 60%, 60-40.
Okay, so 60% of our tax base here in Burlington is
Commercial property
commercial
taxes.
property taxes.
Yeah.
Do you think if you owned a technology company, which there are many, I mean, go down 128, I see Oracle, I see Siemens is on 128, right over behind where Best Buy
Oh,
is.
there's Nuance. There's Oracle bought Sun Micro.
Nokia.
Nokia's
Paul's
over there.
employer.
Yeah.
Purchased by Microsoft.
But okay,
Not the group that he's with.
how much more how difficult do you think it would be to tell Deval Patrick, Ken Gordon, and their technology tax to go shove it and drive up Route 3 and do business out of Nashua, New Hampshire? I don't understand how a state rep, someone that to represent us, and not just Burlington, Bedford too, that has a sizable technology industry over there at Hanscom Base. How, as a state rep, could he be so reckless with our economy of the two towns that comprise the majority
Well, yeah,
of this district?
especially since there's so much high tech in both towns as well. You know, which is what it was targeted for.
Is that
It
news
was-
to
it
him?
was- it was
I mean, he's a
insanity.
lawyer. He doesn't really come from a business background.
Well, true, but I mean, you just have to drive up and down 128 or up 62 and get a sense of the number of high-tech companies that are, in this area. And you're right, up Hanscom and Wiggins Ave. I mean, there's a ton of them over there too. You've got who's over there? EMD Millipore is over in Bedford, big location.
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest names in the state, in the country, having to
yeah.
do with technology, are based here in Burlington or have
Or in Bedford.
office here in Burlington and Bedford.
iRobot's another one.
iRobot. I mean, iRobot is right off of Route 3. Go another 20 minutes and you'll be up in Nashua. Why? Why would Ken Gordon vote on the New Hampshire Economic Stimulus Plan? What else? He's got some other gems in there. I mean, remember Deval Patrick's or the remember there was a gun bill that the Democrats came up with that
Recently
was,
pushed through in response to
that they tried to push through, that was a complete debacle and got shot down. Ken Gordon was one of the co-authors of
Proponents, really.
that bill. As far as I'm concerned, all Ken Gordon has done in the 2 years he's been in office is tax me more, make my life more difficult, and try and take my rights away.
Yeah, he's one of the most liberal voters on up there in Boston on Capitol Hill.
He's a nice guy, super, super nice guy. He would make a great next door neighbor to someone, and let's make sure that's what he's doing after this November. I mean, I think it's time for Ken to go. I think he's far out of his depth in the position that he's in right now. Was there another topic that we wanted to talk about? I feel like we lacerated Ken pretty bad. And like I said, he is a nice guy, and I'm sure people will say, "Oh, I can't believe they're talking about our Ken that way." He's a nice guy. That doesn't cut it. That doesn't mean that he didn't take money out of my pocket by raising the gas tax. And the way that they raised the gas tax, it's not just that the tax went up. It's that they
don't ever have to vote for it again.
They don't ever.
made
The
it
taxes
tied-
can continue to go up, and
They
they
made it
never
tied
have to
into the
vote for it
CPI,
again.
which is why they did that on purpose and did it in the dark of night, which is how they get all these tough tax bills through when nobody's got their eye on the ball. But that'll be on the ballot
That will be on the ballot.
for people to roll back.
So would you guys agree that it'll be a very good night for Republicans in November if the main issue is the economy?
Yes,
Yeah.
countrywide it'll be a very good night. Massachusetts doesn't always necessarily vote in lockstep with the rest of the country, but I think, all the candidates have an excellent chance. I think Charlie Baker this time around has got much better recognition throughout the state at the top of the ticket, which I think will draw in, some votes for the rest of the people on the ticket. This is Karen Polito running for lieutenant governor. Is her second time around. She ran for treasurer last time around, so I think her name recognition has probably, been improved quite a bit. So I think, that helps at the top of the ticket, and I think that hopefully will help downstream on the ticket. And they're up against a group of candidates that have not a lot of name recognition on the other side for the first time in a long time.
Or possibly too much name recognition.
Well,
At the top.
At the top, that may be true, but if you think about the rest of them, a lot of them, it's their first time, first bite at the apple. So be curious to see how it all shakes out and which way independents will vote. It's interesting. Republicans in this state are 9 or 11% of the population, and Democrats around 32. So the vast majority of the electorate now is independent and can go in either direction. So, I think if they want fiscally conservative candidates that will have job creation and getting the economy back on sound footing again, then that's the direction they'll go in. If they want the status quo, which we've lived in the state for a long time, then it may not be as good a night as we hope. We'll see how it shakes out.
Either way, I'm counting on the Republicans to take the Senate, so that'll be our consolation prize if it's a difficult night here in Massachusetts, which I do not expect. I think we're going to walk away with a couple of wins. I think to say that we're going to run the gauntlet and pick up everything.
I think Charlie Baker has got an excellent chance.
I would put it right now.
I put him ahead of the curve, actually.
The polls the polls right now will likely tell you otherwise, but,
but
Charlie Baker's position at this point in the race, I would be pretty darn content if I was Charlie Baker. He doesn't want to peak too early.
Yeah, well, that's true. And how much do you believe in the polls? He had Martha, so far ahead in the Democratic primary, and that was turned out to be a nail biter at the end.
Right.
I think they had her up by double digits.
Yeah.
Almost 20%, and she went up 5. It was all said and done.
That's funny. Every poll that involves her, it's always the polls that involve her for some reason. Because remember that poll 2 nights before the race against Scott Brown in the Globe that had her up 17% or something?
I know.
She just doesn't know how to close the deal.
Well, I think some of those activities in Washington hurt her badly.
Oh, you're right. Like the reporter that her body man pushed over, and then she looked over her shoulder and she didn't see a thing.
Hey, there's a couple of housekeeping issues I want to get into before we finish up here, and that is that there's a Karen Polito fundraiser tomorrow night at the Escadrille for those who would like to attend. It's being, Mr. Murray has opened up the facility for a couple of hours, and Joe Pandolfo is trying to organize it, so if anybody would like to attend, we'd love to see you there. And on October 1st, we're having a little meet and greet at the VFW from 7 to 8:30 for Paul Gerard. So if anybody is interested in getting to know a little bit more about Paul, that'd be a great time to meet him. Again, that's on October 1st from 7 to 8:30. So it'd be great if we could see you all there. And anyways, I want to make sure we got those 2 housekeeping items out before the end of the show.
No, that's important. I mean, the event on October 1st, it's a chance that if you haven't met Paul Gerard yet, that you can come out, you can shake his hand, you can ask him where he stands on the issues, you can tell him what your concerns are. Maybe there's something that, concerns you and your neighbors on your street that it hasn't even made it onto, the general radar screen yet. And the idea is that we'll have a representative in Burlington that's going to concentrate on the economic issues and the issues that matter to you. Not, he's not going to try and fight some national battle over, against guns, to take guns away, or, hop on every pet liberal cause. This is an opportunity for you to get out there. And the next 6 weeks is really an opportunity for you to get your voice heard. And, if you haven't gotten involved yet, there's an office up at 630 Boston Road in Billerica that you can help work for all the Republican candidates. I've been long-winded. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you.